Asha Ritsinghani. Dr. Asha is international faculty from USA, and thank you so much. And it's our pleasure and honor to have you with us on this Pundit show, Doctor. Thank you so much, Ritu Santwani, Doctor, as well. Because of her efforts, we could get Doctor on the panel of discussion for today's topic. About InnoCare Life Sciences, we are engaged in marketing specialized innovative products across the country in the field of infertility as well as gynecological care. To begin the session, first we would like to introduce Ritu Santwani. She specializes in IVF infertility test tube baby. She's a director, Pune Test Tube Baby Center. Doctor is 18 years veteran of OBS and Gynec services. She specializes in test tube baby and each and every aspect of infertility to provide comprehensive services in IVF, IUI, ICSI, assisted hatching, egg donation, embryo donation, surrogate mother, male infertility, semen banking, embryo freezing, as well as sexual and psychological problems. Doctor is associated as a honorary professor with WIMS Medical College, Kajurula, as well as doctor is a panel consultant of Ruby Hall Clinic and Inamdar Multi-Speciality Hospital. So Dr. Ritu, welcome you on this Pundit show. Once again, welcome you. Let me introduce Dr. Asha Ritsinghani. Dr. Asha is an international faculty. Madam is MD FSCOG, Professor Maternal and Fetal Medicine, Department of Obs and Gynae, Albany Medical College, New York, USA. Doctor is an international ambassador, Society of Maternal and Field of Medicine, USA. So today we have both national as well as international for the Pundit show. So without taking much of time, let's begin the show, I would say. So welcome you, Dr. Ritu and Dr. Asha.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sankalp, for the kind introduction.
Thanks.
So today with us, the Asha ma'am is here. So I'm very happy to have the Asha ma'am with us on my very second show of this Pundit at the Ritu show. So as friends, as you know, in this show, I interview the people whom I admire, from whom I learned a lot. So who are having a passion of giving the teaching. As all of you know, that knowledge is always increases by the sharing. So I am very, very much grateful to Asha ma'am. Asha ma'am accepted the invitation on my single message. And I think this is one positive thing I got from the COVID time. COVID time में जो हम लोग इतना डरे हुए, इतना दूर हो गए, but via the social media, we all have come very close, very together. And ma'am, what is running this through this COVID-19 group? Daily we are getting so much nice updates. Daily we are getting so much information. So I have no words, ma'am. So thank you, because this is such a time zone difference also. But ma'am has accepted everything according to our convenience. A very, very warm welcome to ma'am. Ma'am, there are so many doctors have also joined. All are saying you a very warm welcome from the India. So many doctors have joined. So, ma'am, I want to now directly go into the session. Ma'am, let us first know regarding the incidence of this COVID-19 in the US.
US.
Yes,
go ahead. US is sort of the epicenter of the world, and in US, New York is the epicenter, and I happen to live in New York. So I'm like 2 hours from New York City. Where there have been well over 20,000 deaths in just the one city, and the city has 8 million population. But in the US, we have had, I was just checking today how many patients we have in US, and it's, well over, it's very, very high. It's like hundreds of thousands, like it's getting close to almost 2 million. So we have had our share. And, India is the 4th one now in the world, I guess. And so you would have the numbers for India, right?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, here we are having the Arogya Setu app as it suggested by Prime Minister Modi ji. So we all are having the Arogya Setu app. So I'm going to read only from that app only. What's the current status?
Sure. Yeah. Yes. So we have really been beaten. But the good thing is in our state and in our city, the numbers are really dwindling down because we are very strict about wearing masks. So hopefully, with the protest and all, maybe it's going to get bad again. But so far, the numbers have really come down. So we have started to open up very, very gradually.
Ma'am, according to this Arogya Setu app, I am suggesting sharing here the recent data of the India. According to this data, just now it's showing the total reported cases of 3,10,760. Deaths are reported 8895. This is a very recent data from this Arogya Setu app. So, ma'am, my first question to you is from who we have to advise for this COVID testing? Is each and everybody should be advised for the COVID testing?
No, it's not recommended because you wouldn't know what to do with the test results. But if somebody is symptomatic, they could get tested. In fact, in USA, they say even if you are not even if you don't get the test done and you have mild symptoms and you are a person who is at risk, follow the treatment plan for somebody presuming that you're mildly sick and not to necessarily get tested because the number of tests available are very, very few. So if you cannot get tested, that's fine. Of course, we encourage testing because now our numbers are more in terms of availability of testing. But even if you cannot get tested, follow the same guidelines as though you're mildly infected. So routine testing is not recommended for otherwise not at-risk people.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, and what the test we are doing, what do you think? How much the reliability of these tests? Today morning also, Dr. Narendra Malhotra and some other doctors have asked you the same question in the COVID-19 group. That how much how much these tests are reliable regarding RT-PCR? Yeah.
It depends on the type of test that's done. And the unfortunate thing is there are so many people that are trying to make these tests available. And so there are three types of tests. The most important is the RT-PCR, the reverse the polymerase chain reaction reverse transcriptase. That's supposed to be the gold standard. And that has about a 10% error rate. And it's 10% error rate in companies that have been FDA approved, such as the Abbott laboratories. There are other labs that had a much higher false negative rate or false positive rate, but false negative rate is more common. And so you really have to be careful where you get tested. But the RT-PCR is the best, the gold standard. The other one is the antibody test. But the problem with the antibody test is it's not meant for diagnosis. By the time you have the antibodies, you've already been infected for several days. So it doesn't help in the diagnosis. So RT-PCR is your go-to test.
Yeah. So, ma'am, if we have to go for the testing, we have to go only for the RT-PCR is the gold standard.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ma'am, as today morning only some doctors have also discussed in the group also. Ma'am, is it like that everyone will get infected sooner or later?
Hopefully not. Because, there have been some countries and some cities that have done studies on this so-called herd immunity. Yeah. Herd immunity is more of a desire, but it is not a realistic desire. As you all know, Sweden and the neighboring countries, very tiny countries with population between 5 and 10 million or 5 and 11 million, I guess. So Sweden decided on herd immunity attempt. So no masking, no nothing, just live your regular lives. And they had 6,000 or so, many people died, close to 6,000. Versus in the neighboring countries, just a couple of hundred people died that followed the lockdown and all of that. So Sweden was hoping that the population would have had the herd immunity. Herd immunity means when you check the population, minimum 70% will have the antibodies. But in this case, only about 7% had the antibodies. So it did not cause any herd immunity. Same with New York City. And so many people died. So there is no such thing called herd immunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, is it any timeline for this testing for this test? What you recommend and what the data suggests?
So, the thing for the timeline is you have to, if you are exposed,
Yeah.
if you go the same day, it's not going to be positive. It takes time. So after an exposure, depending on how big of an exposure it is, the average timing is 5 to 6 days that the person will get infected and get symptomatic. And the test will be positive a couple of days before that, the RT-PCR. So initially they're pre-symptomatic, and they can be pre-symptomatic for 2 to 3 days and then get symptoms. So the test will be positive 2 to 3 days before the symptoms. But if you do it right after exposure, it's going to be falsely negative. So you shouldn't be doing it immediately after exposure. You should be protective of your people around you and then get tested a few days later if you develop symptoms.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, as we have already discussed about this RT-PCR, what's your opinion regarding this antibody test?
Antibody testing is good only for population studies to see if there's herd immunity. Like you said, sabhi logon ko ho jayega. So let's just test everybody, and probably 50% have the antibodies. And so, most people are not going to be infected is the thinking, but that's wrong thinking. So when you're doing these population studies, you want to check and see who has antibodies. And that's when Sweden saw that only 7% did. In New York, it was close to 20%, but more than 80% actually did not have antibodies. So you don't do antibodies unless you're doing population studies, or if you're trying to, donate your plasma for a research study on convalescent plasma.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, how to manage if the test come positive and the person is having no symptoms?
So, a number of patients will be asymptomatic. About 25% of people are asymptomatic. Even if they are asymptomatic, they are infectious. So they have to follow the same guidelines, which is they really need to stay away for 14 days. If they should not expose themselves to anyone, wearing a mask, quarantining themselves. Actually, if they're positive, they should be isolating themselves. Quarantine is only if you're exposed, then you quarantine for 2 weeks. But if you test positive, then you have to isolate yourself. So isolation is a bit more strict than quarantine. And so if you are positive for an infection, then you have to prove that you're negative. It takes minimum 10 days for the virus, 7 to 10 days for the virus to clear up. So after about 7 to 10 days, you can go ahead and get tested. And you have to have 2 negative RT-PCRs 24 hours apart to be deemed as non-infectious.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Vaibhav, please check. There are a lot of messages I am getting that they are not able to enter inside.
Yeah,
please
I'm
check,
getting some too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. Because ma'am, a lot of echo are coming. Last time also in the session, because some are not muted, so then whole session will be spoiled. The Vaibhav, please check. Please check. Lot of messages we are getting. Sangeeta, ma'am, please hold on. Ma'am, one message has come. Sangeeta Pai, she is writing, I am Dr. Asha's younger sister. So
Yes.
she's welcoming you, but I think Vaibhav is not. Vaibhav, please check. Please check. What's the problem there? Around 20 messages are got, they are not able to join. Ma'am, so what are the stages of this COVID-19 infection?
So there are about 4 stages. So one is asymptomatic is one, but pre-symptomatic. And then the symptomatic, it can be about 80% or so will be mild disease. They stay at home. That's the sort of a mild stage, and 80% will recover without any issue. Of the remaining 20 or so percent, about 15% will be seriously ill, requiring oxygen. They have to get admitted. And those people, most of them will recover. Almost all of them will recover. But about 5% will get very, very ill. And those that get very ill, they end up having more than 2/3 of their lung involved, and they end up requiring heavy duty support. sometimes ventilators, they become critically ill. And then those 5% are the ones where you can have multi-organ dysfunction. So of the 100 people that get infected, if somebody says, oh, don't worry, my 3 cousins had it and they got better, guess what? More than 95% will get better, and at least 80% will have very mild symptoms. So even if your cousins or friends or whoever, even if they got better and you might say, I gave them vitamin XYZ and they got better. Vitamin XYZ had nothing to do with it. More than 80% will get better on their own with mild symptoms, but they're all infectious. And if they give the infection to a grandparent or an elderly person at home, or to a colleague or a neighbor who is at high risk, that is what you want to avoid, because you may be okay, but I may not be okay. So you better stay away from me. I tell that to my residents and fellows all the time. They're walking around without a mask and they say, oh, I'm not worried. And I say, I'm worried. So stay away from me.
Yeah, very practical point, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Friends, sorry, ma'am, to interrupt. Friends, those who are not able to log in because there is a lot of echo. So this show is going live on the Facebook also. We have already tagged the Asha ma'am also. This show is live on my timeline and Asha ma'am's timeline also. So you can check there also. Sangeeta ma'am, you can go to Asha ma'am timeline also. The show is coming back. Ma'am, you please make your timeline open for all. If it is only for friends.
I would have no idea how to do it.
We have tagged. So the show is going directly on your timeline also. Going on. Because a lot of doctors want to join and to listen to the Asha ma'am. Lot of messages I am getting. Ma'am, there Dr. Manjeet Mehta has joined. Manjeet ma'am, welcome. Manjeet ma'am is asking, what is the window period for the detection by RT-PCR testing?
So, the thing is that when you're exposed to it, it can take up to 14 days. So if you do the test on day 1, day 2, it's going to be negative. If average people get infected between day 5 and 6, but some will, most of them, 95% will get infected by 12 days, by 11 and a half days. So majority of the patients who will become positive by 12 days, but it can take up to 14 days. So be careful. After exposure, you could become positive 2 weeks later. That's why when you are exposed to somebody with the infection, with active infection, especially if you have not protected yourself for 14 days, you need to quarantine yourself. Unless you're not able to quarantine, then you have to be super extra careful around everybody who's around you.
Hope, Manjeet ma'am, your query has been solved. Thank you, Asha ma'am. Ma'am, now what is regarding the death rate from the disease? From this COVID, yeah.
So, overall about 1% will die. And these 1% of people that die, usually they are the ones that are of the 100 patients who will get the disease, 5 will be critically ill. Of the people who are critically ill, close to 50% die. And so it's only the critically ill people that are in the ICU on ventilators, they are at the highest risk. So in their case, the death rate is close to 50%. And people that are at risk for death are people who are or at risk for becoming critically ill, first of all. So those are the vulnerable population with medical histories, with diabetes, hypertension, cardiac disease, obesity, immune deficiency. Those are the people that tend to become critically ill. Once you're critically ill, the death rate is close to 50%, but the rest of them, the death rate is way below 1%. Older people are at risk. Yeah, older people are at much higher risk, especially if somebody is above 80. You have a grandparent above 80, please don't go next to your grandparents.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, please enlighten us about the cytokine storm. Although you have shared us very beautifully in the group, but I want that everybody should can get again enlightened about the cytokine storm.
Yeah, sure. So the cytokine storm, what happens is, in the disease, there are, the lymphocytes are there, the white cells are there. And so these cells are the ones that produce, there are the T cell, the lymphocytes. So the lymphocytes, there are T and B lymphocytes. And the B lymphocytes, they produce antibodies. And the T lymphocytes produce cytokines, and there are many, many cytokines that are very inflammatory. IL-7, so cytokines, a part of them are called interleukins, and interleukins, they regulate the immune and inflammatory responses, and so they regulate the immune cells. And when they get activated, you'll see these levels going up. The interleukin 6 now is being studied, and it's high in patients that are really sick. And so since they're significantly elevated, they're trying to help fight the infection. But what happens is the immune response, it doesn't stop, it goes bananas. And it just gets totally deranged. And normally it's supposed to heal. These interleukins are supposed to protect the person from infection, and it helps the immune response. But when this immune response goes berserk, and then it gets deranged, so instead of helping, it makes the organs worse, and the organs get swollen, edematous, and the body then starts to attack itself. And so it's just like, if you cut your finger or something and you get a little pus in your hand or your arm, it's going to heal. It'll get red and swollen and it will heal. But in some people, it will just spread throughout the body and you get sepsis. Similarly, the interleukins are supposed to keep the infection localized, but instead of it just, in a few of them, it goes berserk, and then all the organs start to get damaged. So the lungs will get ARDS, the kidneys can get damaged, patient can end up on dialysis, the heart muscles can get damaged, and the troponin levels can go up. And when the troponin levels go up, those people are at very high risk for death. So that's called
Thank
the
you so much, ma'am.
cytokine.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, you have answered my other question also, because I have planned to ask you the other question, that what organs can be affected by this. So you have beautifully summarized, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one question is coming from Dr. Manjeet Mehta, ma'am. Ma'am is asking, is it possible that someone gets exposed, gets infected, and get immunized without even knowing it?
Oh, yes, 25. So of the 100 people that are infected, 25% are supposed to be asymptomatic. Those numbers are actually changing because, we are not doing mass surveillance. But the thinking is, before they used to think maybe 40%, but more recently they think maybe 25% of people are completely asymptomatic. So I'm glad we are at a distance, because for all you know, I'm an asymptomatic person and I could give it to you. So I need to wear my mask. And so because of this asymptomatic carrier, what's not known is how infectious or how contagious these asymptomatic people are. Maybe they're not so contagious, we don't know, but we still need to wear a mask because we could be the asymptomatic infected people. But even in us, if I'm asymptomatically affected, within a couple of weeks, the virus should leave me, maximum 1 month.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, what are the long-term side effects of this COVID?
It depends. Like if somebody gets critically ill and they get, so I'm talking about the 5% that get critically ill. And of these critically ill, the ones that survive, they can get lung fibrosis. So the alveoli, there's a lot of damage, a lot of fibrosis because the tissue gets totally damaged. So these people end up being sick for a long time. There are many people that have gone into the long-term care facilities for care. In younger people, they're finding strokes, very large strokes, big, huge clots in the brain, arterial as well as venous. And so when you get a large stroke as bad as that, those people are dying, but those that are not dying, they can end up being whatever, whichever part is affected, paralyzed or whatever. The other thing is the smell that is lost. Even after the disease goes away, a good number of people that have lost their smell and taste, they continue to experience loss of smell. And it's, time will tell if it comes back, because the virus has gone away, but the lack of smell is still going on. So maybe those are permanently damaged. Similarly with the kidneys, people can have bad kidney damage. So it can leave a person badly disabled.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, Dr. Sushma Bakshi, ma'am, has joined. Ma'am is asking that do asymptomatic persons can also transmit the infection too?
It's thought that they probably can. The data isn't there, but the thinking is they can because they are having the virus in the nasopharynx. Nasopharyngeal swabs are positive, so yes, they can. And especially if somebody is more vulnerable, they would be at higher risk. If they are exposing some sicker people to the virus, then they could, yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, this person can become infectious till how long? If
So
the COVID is it? Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Please. Yeah.
The virus hangs around in your system for about 2 weeks. Actually, when somebody gets symptomatic, typically I'm talking about the 80% that that heal. Typically, in about 10 to 14 days, the tests will be negative, and so that's why you wait at least 10 days and minimum 3 days after the symptoms, because let's say they're symptomatic on day 14, still having some throat or some nasal discharge or whatever, wait. They have to be completely fine for 3 days before you retest them. Some people actually go on to shed it for up to 28 days. And, there are case reports of people that will be RT-PCR positive for 2 months. It's not known if it's truly the virus or just the protein particles that are hanging around. So they may not be infectious. They may just have the particles hanging around. So they will be positive but not infectious. However, people then just, they are confined to their homes because they're considered infectious. And time will tell.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, Dr. Kiran has joined. They are asking, ma'am, first they are complimenting for the excellent show is going on. They are he's asking, he or she is written Kiran. Huh? So if we get COVID once and we are cured, can it reoccur? What are the percentage of the recovered people are at the risk of having a recurrence?
It's not known. It's not known because whoever gets infected, they will develop antibodies, but it's not known how good these antibodies are. And more recently, just within the last couple of days, they have found a mutation of the spike protein. And so now the concern is that the mutations were not really happening much significantly. Normally, like flu viruses, they mutate all the time. But the COVID-19 virus was not really mutating significantly, but just very recently, a couple of days ago, they are seeing that there is a mutation and that, it could be a bad one. And if so, then they could potentially get it again. So it's really not known. I just want to know there is there's a message here saying that there is an issue with the audio. Just an FYI.
Vaibhav, are you there? Vaibhav and Sankalp, please solve this problem. If there is, ma'am, they are already replying, I think, huh? If
Okay,
audio, they have replied already. If audio issue, then please refresh and relog.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Sangeeta ma'am has written that there is no issue with the audio.
Great,
yeah.
great. Good to know.
Yeah. With this webinar, some problem is this only. Sometimes the echo and sometimes this voice problem. Ma'am, please enlighten us regarding this dose response curve. You have beautifully mentioned this COVID-19 group, so we want to get little more enlightened here also. Yeah.
Dose response meaning the viral dose response?
Yes, ma'am.
The thinking is that maybe if you get exposed to a huge dose of virus, your risk would be higher. Also, if you are in contact for a longer time, and if the person speaks really loudly, then you would potentially get a higher dose. Maybe nobody really knows, but that's the theory. And that your risk for infection would be much, much higher. For example, I've given this example a few times, but in Seattle, Washington, this is before the mid-March, before the lockdown, before the mask, before anything. There were about, I believe, 69, 70 women that were singing the choir in a church. They were all together and they were there for 2.5 hours. And they were all practicing singing. And then took breaks, they mingled, everybody was fine, and within about 3 days, 2 of those 70 odd people died. About 3 days, because they had such a high dose from a person who was pre-symptomatic. And majority of those 70 women, I believe at least 65 or so got infected. And some of them got infected very, very badly. I want to say 3 or 4 died, and about 4 or 5 of them got critically ill. But nobody knew that that one woman was pre-symptomatic. So it depends on how much exposure you have. So the less you have your people talk with you, the better it is. Don't let people in front of you talk too loud or talk for too long.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, enlighten us about the prophylactic measures what I mentioned regarding the use of mask also. How much protection we can get by this mask and this immunity boosters?
So, the masks are very good. There are different kinds of masks that we use. And so the physicians that use the N95 masks, which are like respiratory masks. So if your risk is 1, let's say let's use 100. Let's say your risk is 100%. If you use the N95 mask, your risk will go down to 17%. Just using the mask all by itself. If you just use a regular face mask like you do, like the cloth face mask, your risk goes down to 31%. It's not 0. So when you're wearing a face mask and going to the marketplace and somebody next to you has it, your risk is reduced to a third, but it is definitely not 0. It'll be 31% of what your risk would have been otherwise. Same with the gloves and gowns, the risk reduces to about 32%. And if you're using all of it, you use a mask, you use gloves, you use gowns, your risk is down to 9%. But, if you're in company of seeing patients with the disease, if you wear a mask and a face shield, both, your risk goes down to 10% because you need to use the face shield. The virus enters through the eyes, through the nose, and through the mouth. So if you're just closing your nose and mouth, the virus will enter through the eye. In fact, one of the most famous virologists in USA, he very famous, very like a big guy, epidemiologist, everybody just gets his information for everything. He was flying and he was fully covered and took every precaution, but he wasn't wearing glasses. And he came down with the worst COVID-19 infection. He survived, but he's got fibrosis of the lungs. And he said the only thing he can think of was he was on that flight without any goggles or eye cover, and that's how he got infected.
So friends, again, the ma'am has specified the very important points. So the goggles or the eye protection is also must, along with this mask and gloves. Ma'am, enlighten us about the role of this chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. There is a lot of confusion in everybody's mind to use, not to use, because in India, ma'am, the daily we are getting some or the other new guidelines. Daily we are getting.
Yeah, there's been so much discussion about it. So the only studies that have done it, the main randomized trials, there were few that were conducted in the sick people because the hope was that it's going to save everyone. And in the sick people, many, many more people started dying. So there was a study from Brazil and they stopped the trial because they had so many deaths. There was a study at the VA hospital in the USA and there are a lot of deaths, like twice as many deaths in the sick people. So they stopped using it in the sick people. Question is it good for prophylaxis? And the data is, there is no data to support that. And, it's been used for many years. So some people are very attached to it and very emotional about it. And they feel like it's going to save the world. And sure, if they want to take it, hey, go for it. But just be careful that, if you're older, if you have any cardiac issues, please be careful. Don't just self-medicate. Make sure your cardiologist checks you out before you take it. Anybody with a bundle branch block, it can really create a lot of heart issues. And the thing is that if you get sick, please stop immediately because it can damage your heart. A sick heart with a virus can get damaged further with the hydroxychloroquine. And then the second thing is just because you're on hydroxychloroquine, please do not think that you are protected, because I think a lot of doctors in India, I think every doctor is on it, and you know how many doctors have died, and you know how many doctors are very, very ill.
Yes.
I personally know several in Mumbai that have died, which is very tragic. But I think what they're doing is they're taking the hydroxychloroquine, wearing just a regular mask. They keep taking their mask out, scratching the face, putting it, and then that's what's causing them to get infected. When you wear a mask, that's your signal. Do not touch your face. If you keep touching your face, please use the shield. Do not touch your face, especially the doctors, because you have so much exposure to these viruses. But hydroxychloroquine should not make a person feel that they're protected. That's the worry I have, that it is, people are so emotional and they're promoting it, saying that you will never get ill if you take it. Guess what? You will get ill and you can die. So don't depend on it. Take it like a vitamin. I take zinc every day, but take it just because. Don't take it thinking that you're protected. You are not protected.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Means I want to share one thing. Once I write the query to Asha ma'am in the COVID group only regarding this vitamin C and zinc, ma'am has replied so nicely that मतलब अभी तो मैं बिना पढ़े भी किसी को बता सकती हूँ कि see, as the recommendation for the zinc is for the males is 11 mg per day and for the females is 8 mg. So these days we are getting some preparations of 40 to 50 mg of zinc also. So we recommend that also along with this vitamin C 1000 mg per day. Ma'am, I'm correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I take about 50 a day milligrams of zinc because it helps with your immune system. Might as well take it. In fact, the 80% of COVID-19 positive people that are mildly affected, they are at home. We never admit them. We don't even test them. But nowadays our test numbers are going up because it's more available. Anyway, they are told to take only vitamin C 1000 milligrams and zinc 40 to 50 milligrams a day. That's it. And drink plenty of water, run around so you don't get blood clots. Drink plenty of water so your circulation is good, and deep breathing so your lungs get good air in it, and the circulation in your lungs is also good. So, people are asking about aspirin. Will it help? Nobody knows. Nobody knows if a baby aspirin will help in people that are tested positive. If you take it for prophylaxis, it's not going to prevent COVID-19. So forget about it. But if you get COVID-19 and you're in the early stages, will it help? Nobody knows. So we'll find out. Somebody is looking at it.
Yeah. Ma'am, similarly, there is a lot of confusion regarding the use of ivermectin and azithromycin also. Can you enlighten us a little about that also? That some studies regarding the use of ivermectin. Yes, ma'am, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so the ivermectin has been found to be useful, and it's small studies. People are now actually looking at it properly and doing bigger studies. Same with the erythromycin. As you know, WHO is doing the large study called the Solidarity Study, and I think there are 35 countries, and there are 4 different groups that they are treating them differently in the randomized trial. So one group is getting hydroxychloroquine and erythromycin or azithromycin, I'm not sure exactly what, and then one group is getting none, one group is getting just the hydrochloroquine. So we will find out. They were supposed to publish the preliminary results by mid-June, but they stopped the study and then they restarted the study. So I don't know if the preliminary results will come out, but they had 3,500 patients in the study already studied. And that's not enough numbers. You need bigger numbers.
Okay. Ma'am, there are some questions are coming on the Facebook also because we are not able, there are some persons are not able to connect here also. Ma'am, there is one query by Mr. Mehta is asking, is vitamin D3 is also having a role in building the immunity in COVID patients?
So, poor vitamin D, I feel bad for it because it's as you know, vitamin D deficiency is so common. So anything, preeclampsia, IUGR, everything, poor vitamin D gets blamed for it. So I actually, all my patients, I just tell them, take an extra 1,000 units a day. I'm not talking COVID-19. I just even tell my pregnant patients. So people are wondering if vitamin D is associated with a lower immunity. Take it. I take 2,000 units every night just because, I know I'm deficient. We are all deficient. We don't get enough sunshine. I just want to answer a question by Humaira Ali. Are there any ocular manifestation? Yes, absolutely. It's just like conjunctivitis. So people who have viral infections, just regular flu infections, they get conjunctivitis. Same way, this one also causes conjunctivitis, and that may be just your initial symptom. It may not be later on, but it may be an initial symptom.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, my friend is joined, Dr. Kariman from the Lebanon. He has joined. He is asking so many questions. First, Dr. Manjeet ma'am has one more query. Is the same strain genotype of the virus that infects the people in all countries, or there are different subtypes are known? Shall I repeat the question?
That's fine. There are many different genotypes. Genomes, as they're calling it, and there are actually researches going on currently on these genotypes. And I actually looked up a study this morning, and they're talking about just a handful of them that are considered not great, but it's not really the genotype. What's important is that that this is a bad virus, and you're not going to do genome sequencing. So there are many different genome sequences, but if you have it, you should be very protective of yourself and of your family, because the genome sequencing isn't going to take you anywhere. It's more of a basic science research interest. But there are about a handful. But I believe there are like 100 different genome sequences, if I'm not mistaken, something like that I came across. It was actually just published, and I came across this test very recently.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one question by Dr. Kariman. He is asking whether we have to prefer for pregnancy to delivery by cesarean or normal delivery.
So there was a paper just published. I got it just yesterday. So the thing is that majority of the people, that the C-section rate is very high because of fetal distress. And there is data that the placenta has the virus in it, and that it causes vascular abnormalities in the placenta. Plus, the virus is also found between the two membranes, amnion, chorion. They did this study, they published a couple of weeks ago in USA, and they did the culture. So they were sure that it is in the membranes. And so somehow it's probably affecting the fetus. So there's a higher IUGR risk. I think it's close to 40%. And there is higher miscarriage risk. And there have been enough cases with abruption. So we think that there is. So anyway, overall, the C-section rate is very high. In China, it was 90%. In other countries, other experiences, US experiences, it's not that high. But just yesterday, it was published that women that have C-section have a worse outcome. So if you can do a vaginal delivery, that's far better, because when you put them through a C-section, they get sicker, and the risk of them getting sicker is somewhere around 30%. So try to do a normal delivery.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one more query by Dr. Kiran asking, how long do you think the vaccine production will take? And what is your personal view?
So, there are... we all like, can I please get the vaccine? We're all dying to get that vaccine, aren't we? I hope it works. But there are at least 100 different companies that are working on vaccines, of which 7 have shown a lot of promise. And the US government has actually paid these 7 companies $2 billion to make the vaccine. And these companies are, all over. They're not all US companies. But Johnson & Johnson was the first one. But there's something called warp speed vaccine program. So like going at super speed, because vaccines typically take 2-3 years, a few years to make a vaccine. And so they want to make this ASAP. And any vaccine trial goes through 3 phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. After phase 3, when they have tested tens of thousands of people and realize that it's working, then they will start making it. But over here, as the phase 2 has started, people have started manufacturing the vaccines and they're going to store it. So as soon as the phase 2 trial gets done and the phase 3 trial starts, they're going to start making it available. And so the hope is, they were saying December, but recently I heard January is when it's going. They're hoping it will be available, about like 200 million doses or greater. And they're trying to make, between these 7 companies, the desire is to make 5 billion doses to cover the entire population of Earth. So yeah, we are all waiting. Until then, put your masks on. And if this mutation that they just discovered a couple of days ago, if it truly happens to be a bad mutation, that vaccine will be back at, going again, ground zero, starting all over again.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is query by Dr. Sushma ma'am. Sushma Bakshi ma'am. Ma'am is asking regarding is the pre-operative COVID testing is mandatory?
Not really. The governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, he said that let's do it, because on labor and delivery in a New York hospital system, the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital system, there were 7 COVID patients that were not diagnosed until after delivery. So everybody was exposed, all the nurses, the cleaners, doctors, everybody. And they were really upset. So they started testing everyone, and they found about 14%, I think 13.9% of patients that were coming in routine labor or C-section or whatever were testing positive, asymptomatic. So they said that everybody is going to get tested so that the healthcare professionals are not exposed to it. So the governor said you should do it a week before they come, like at 39 weeks, they should be tested, and then they can deliver. Husband and the wife both need to get tested. But, we started doing it, but there are not enough tests. So we stopped doing it. So we are just very ultra careful. The other thing is, in our town, the number of COVID cases has dropped sharply. So, we are more complacent. But in India, it's growing by leaps and bounds. So you cannot be complacent. So if you want to do it, I think it's a good idea to do it if it's available. At 39 weeks, do it. If it's negative, bring her in, induce her within 2 days, and get her done and over with. And inducing at 39 weeks is a good idea based on that ARRIVE trial from last year.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. But here we are doing, in India now, we are doing for every patient who is coming with the labor pains or for any surgery, we have the instructions that we have to do. Any other precautions here? Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Before admission. Yes, we are doing. Yeah. Ma'am, with us, Dr. Jumani has joined, a stalwart in the field of the sexology. Sir is asking the question that what are the pharma companies which are doing research on the vaccine, Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson?
Well, there are at least 100 different companies, and Johnson & Johnson was the first one. And, before this, the Warp Speed vaccine program that the Trump administration started paying to, before, Johnson & Johnson was the very, very first one. And of the 7 companies, there's a smaller company, I'm forgetting the name, it's in Boston. So at least those 2 are US-based companies, I know that. I don't know about the other 5 companies.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, there is one query regarding the use of aspirin also. We have already discussed, you already mentioned the... So, ma'am, for this thromboprophylaxis, do you recommend for this aspirin? Again, there is one query because of the same. Yeah.
It's not for prophylaxis of non-infected people. If a non-infected person takes it, they may end up bleeding, and so people should not be just taking it routinely. The cardiologist can give it to people with hypertension or cardiac disease or whatever they normally do, but not like you and I shouldn't be taking it for COVID prophylaxis, because it doesn't prevent COVID. And when you get COVID, 80% will be very mild. They don't get blood clots. So don't put yourself at risk by taking the aspirin. But you can take if somebody gets infected and is very sick, and they are admitted in the critical care unit, those are the people that they're giving thromboprophylaxis, they're using heparin. The problem with heparin is 10 to 15% develop bleeding. And then heparin also causes the platelets to go down even further. It's called HIT, HIT, and up to 3%. So even giving heparin to people that are ill but not critically ill is up for debate. So I just leave it to the ICU people because their protocols change every day.
Yeah, thank you so
But
much, ma'am.
aspirin, don't take aspirin unnecessarily.
Okay. Ma'am, now what are the complications reported with this COVID during the pregnancy?
So, fortunately, pregnant people, they can get very, very ill. But fortunately, they don't get as ill as the non-pregnant person. The minute you deliver them, they can get very ill. So postpartum is the highest risk if they are actively infected. So if you have an infected pregnant person, please do not deliver them if they are 30, 32, 34 weeks. Do not rush to deliver. Let her get better on her own, and most of the times she will get better on her own. People who are infected, acutely infected, symptomatic, but not terribly symptomatic, maybe mildly symptomatic, maybe asymptomatic, maybe pre-symptomatic. When you deliver them in the immediate postpartum period, they can get very ill, and that's when most of the deaths have occurred, is in the immediate postpartum period. Iran has a series of 9 very critically ill women, of which 7 died. The other 2 were on, like close to dying. All of the maternal deaths occurred within a couple of days after delivery. And women that were pregnant, when they experienced fetal death, after that the mothers died. So after delivery or after fetal death, they get intubated, and a few days after that they die. So postpartum is very dicey. That's why keep them pregnant. Don't let them deliver if they are not in labor.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, regarding this breastfeeding, there are a lot of questions also we are getting in our WhatsApp also. How safe is the breastfeeding, and how much are the chances of the newborn babies to get infected if the mother is COVID positive?
It depends. So the breast milk, there's at least one case report where they found the virus. So there are not too many studies on breast milk having the virus. And so if a pregnant patient, they say that if she is actively having viral shedding, it's better to keep the baby away for 2 weeks, because she could potentially make the baby very sick. Fortunately, children that get sick, majority of them will do very well, but the baby can get sick, and there have been some neonatal deaths. So if she is going to nurse her baby, she could use, and there are like some countries where the mother has to nurse, such as Africa, the HIV women nurse the babies there because otherwise the baby will die of starvation. And in US, it's an absolute no. If a woman has HIV, it's illegal. In fact, the doctor can be fined huge and get a big lawsuit if the HIV mom breastfeeds. Same way with the COVID-19, we recommend them that if they absolutely must nurse the baby, they need to use like a plastic partition or something, so the baby is not directly exposed to her nasal discharge, so the baby doesn't get it, because babies have become infected. In fact, when they looked at the children, there have been, I think, like 5,000 odd children they looked at, various ages, not necessarily newborn, that got infected. 83% got infected by a family member. So sure, they can breastfeed, but please use a barrier between the mother and the baby.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, already we have exceeded so much time, but my one very important query, we all want to know regarding the use of this remdesivir.
The thing is, I know it's the only medicine that has been found to enter the virus and attack the virus from the inside. So inside the virus, there is RNA and there is ATP, and the RNA has to multiply. So the remdesivir actually acts on the ATP, and it prevents the multiplication of the RNA. But it's an okay medicine. It's we are giving it to all sick people. But the problem is, if there are 100 people that are supposed to die from the disease, if you give remdesivir, how many deaths are you going to prevent? About 4%. So it's not your answer, but at least you can save 3 to 4% people. That's better than 0%. So it's shown to reduce the death rate. Plus, when you give remdesivir randomized trial, and they tried to look at hospital in sick people, not the critically ill, but the very sick people, the severe people that were admitted. Remdesivir people went home on 11th day, and without remdesivir, they went home on the 15th day. So there were 4 less days of suffering, because COVID-19 can really mess up with your body big time. It's so painful. And so remdesivir can reduce it by 4 days. So it's helpful in that. And there was a recent randomized trial in a monkey. I don't know if it was randomized. No, I take it back. It was just a monkey trial. And they saw that those with remdesivir, those that were given and versus not given, they had better lungs. So it prevented lung injury. So maybe it's going to prevent lung injury in humans. There are trials going on. But now it's given to all sick people in the USA.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. My program is scheduled for half an hour and we already exceeded 1 hour. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your precious time. And again, I thank you from my bottom of heart. I have never seen a stalwart like you who accepted the invitation and is ready to answer all of our queries. Thank you, InnovaCare, also for organizing such excellent sessions. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again. So friends, before we wind up, I want to end up with these 2 lines. So as we all know, now we are have in the unlock phase in the India. Ma'am, we are getting so many compliments that you have done a very excellent session. So friends, we want to end up with these 2 lines. If this an invisible virus can shake the whole world, then we have to have a strong trust, the invisible supreme soul, invisible supreme power, which can save the whole world too. So we have to think very positively. We have to be very positively. Thank you once again, ma'am. Thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. And for the physicians, I just want to let the physicians know we have a COVID-19 Facebook closed group, so you can't find it. But if your friends are on it and Dr. Ritu is on that COVID group, you can come through her. As long as your profile says you're a physician, you will be entered as a member of the COVID-19. And, we are in it together. We are all at risk. And we all are learning from each other. And I'm learning a lot from you, all of you. And so, I'm available anytime. Every night I spend at least an hour between 11 p.m. and 12 midnight on that Facebook group. And also early morning, I'll get up between 5:30 and 6:30. So we are all in it together. So let's all work together. Let's all pray together. And let's all be safe. And, 6 months will pass by, and before you know, the vaccine will be here. Thank you so much, Dr. Ritu. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.